Previously on agentpalmer.com, Jurassic Park, the novel's underlying themes are anything but extinct 30 years later. I look back at the 3 hallmarks of this podcast after celebrating 1 year of this show, and from wavering on whether this show should exist, Bill and I are now wondering if his show should come back. This is the Palmer Files, episode 28 with my friend Chris Maier. This is the 4th of 4 episodes discussing friendship by examining one up close. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Sturshik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 28th episode is the 4th of 4 episodes about friendship, continuing with one friend I've never physically met. Kids live through computers now. They make all their friends over the internet, so they don't understand how nonverbal communication works. They don't understand body language or casual sarcasm. They love irony, but they never understand any joke they don't make themselves. In 100 years, no one will be able to talk in public. Talking will be like blacksmithing. That quote comes from Chuck Klosterman's novel, The Visible Man. Given the nature of that quote, you can call Chris and I blacksmiths. We do love irony, and we do talk, and we still understand how nonverbal communication and sarcasm work despite the distance. But that will become apparent as the show rolls on. What you are about to hear is simple and yet complex. The episode and others like it all contain 4 main questions. Why are we friends? How did we meet? How did we become friends? Why are we still friends? Through the answers to those questions, the discussions, and the stories that ensue, Chris and I will dive deep into our shared past and the meaning of, and perhaps reason for, our friendship. Before we get into it, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or after, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, or Chris at Chris Maier BC, that's at ChrisMaier BC. You can hear more of Chris on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast, or on How Was Your Week, Honey, a podcast he hosts with his lovely wife, Kristin. Email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com, and don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Chris, why are we friends?
I have no idea. No. You know, I gotta make a wisecrack. That's part of why we're friends. Why are we friends? Similar interests, good conversations. We have sports in common. Like there's so many different topics that you and I have in common. But aside from that, actually, I would say one of the biggest reasons we're friends, and you get a lot of the credit for this. I'm terrible at staying consistent in my friendships. As in the one to reach out, the one to make contact. And it's something that you're very good at. Now, I know you take a lot of shit from people because they'll say, oh, Palmer won't leave me alone, or he calls me all the time. But I have to say that is the one thing that I really appreciate about you, because one of the reasons why we're still friends it's actually been years now. It feels weird to say that, but it's the truth, is you don't let time deter you from maintaining your friendships. And someone like me, I need somebody like that. My wife has a similar disposition.
So you are the 4th friend in this series, and it was based on length of knowing people, right? So Zapata, I knew the longest. Chris, I knew the second longest, and Bill was only a couple years before you. What's interesting about all of those is what you just said of me being the one to reach out. So Chris will call me. The first Chris is what I'll call him for confusion. But like Zapata went hermit on me. So like I had to reach out to him. I usually have to reach out to him. Bill is the same way. Like I reach out to Bill. That's, so when we start to like talk, like it's kind of where I'm at in all my other relationships. Like I'm the person that reaches out, and I don't think of it in terms of like, oh, like in order for it to be a real relationship give and take, like you have to call me half the time. Like I know that's not everybody's personality. That's not how this works. So it's like, that's what I'm used to. And like you get the benefit of the first Chris, Hughes, because he's the person who I'm closest with that also has a family. So, and I've been with him through that process. Like I knew him before he was the father, but I've known him after too. So I understand I'm having dinner with the family, I'll call you back, or I can't because I got to take somebody to soccer or whatever. So all these things that you've said to me, I understand where you're coming from, and it's like, okay, I'll get you, I'll get you later. I'll get you after the kids go to bed. Now, the time difference does not make this very easy. Like I know that I talk to you on your way to work, and I'm like done with I'm getting ready for lunch. Like
right. Well, I have memories of like my mom, for an example. She'd want to call her sister, and we lived in the middle of the country, which is, similar time zone to where you are in the East Coast, trying to talk to her sister back on the West Coast. And this was during the time of, if you called after 6 p.m., then the long distance charges were,
or if you called after 6 p.m., like, what's happened? Like, because, I mean, like, like, you are older than me, but you're not so older than me. Like, I remember, like, if the phone rang before, like, 10 a.m. or after 8, that's a rarity.
Exactly. And I remember my mom playing this like calculation game of, okay, well, it's 7:30 here, which is this time there, but it should cost this much. And if I'm off the phone by 8, there's a lot of that to it. And then, talking about having kids, I don't have as many friends that don't have kids, probably for just what you're talking about. Anyone with children really has that understanding of nothing is set in stone. Not, you may say, hey, let's get together at 8:00, but that means hopefully we can get together at 8:00. And you are very understanding of that, and you have no issues if you give me a call or a text and I just don't answer, because I'll get to you eventually. And I've had single friends in the past who will bucket that and say, well, I called you. You didn't answer. Nope.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I was trained, quote unquote, trained well enough by working behind the scenes with the Seven Dag crew, because Grant and Jason the Angry Ginger both have kids. So despite the fact that we're going to record at 9, like it does, like, and for a while, especially when those two were still hosting, no matter whose house it was, you had to wait till everybody was settled first. So while Grant may have showed up at Ginger's house at 8 or 8:30, we may not be recording at 9. Maybe there's a thing. Maybe somebody wants a drink. Like, these things all need to be taken care of. And because of Chris Hughes and us starting a business together and working on projects together and having full-time jobs and him having a family, so we were waiting until the kids went down. And then kids went down, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, all right, well, I'll call you at 8, and if the kids aren't down, we'll go at 8:30. We'll go at 9. Like, you learn to roll with those punches, and maybe it's because I've had friends that had kids. Like, I don't need my own kids to understand how that works. So for us, like I mean, the way you talk about it, it must have been refreshing for somebody to like completely get it.
Okay, here's a perfect example. You're very well aware that I moved, my current location, I moved here 10 years ago. The majority of my friends, and myself included, just before I left, my daughter, my oldest, was born 6 months before I left. So let's say my group of 4 or 5, guy friends, although they may have had girlfriends, none of them were in wholly committed relationships and or even contemplating children.
Sure.
So when I got here, I maintained those relationships to a degree, but honestly, the only guy that I still talk to is the one that is now married and has 2 kids. And I never got a message from him that said, "Oh, I get it now." But there are certain topics and subjects we could discuss, and the time, like you just knew that he understood. Whereas I can think of times in the first year or two of being here, picking up the phone and going, "Will, it's 1 o'clock in the morning here, which means it's 3 o'clock in the morning there. Whatever you're up to, I want no part of. It's just not who I am anymore."
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess before we get too far ahead, how did we meet?
Well, I know when I first talked to you.
Okay.
That was on an episode, what the hell was that show called? Inglorious Gentlemen? The Inglorious Gentlemen?
That's correct. Yeah.
You were just a voice on the other end of the line. It was my second podcast ever that I had just been on Diamond Mines, of my uncle and cousin.
Yep.
The night before. And I got a text at dinner time, speaking of ill-timed communications, from my Uncle Paul, who was a part of that show, saying, "Hey, we've had some guys drop out. If you'd like to be on tonight, we're discussing politics." And I thought, yay, family and politics. What could go wrong?
If I remember correctly, that episode was Paul, you, Henno, myself, and
Doug. It's definitely Doug. Yeah.
And Doug. That was the crew. And by the way, that episode no longer exists. I mean, I have a copy, but that episode no longer exists, and I can say how wrong I was because that was before a certain election, and we were not only were we talking politics, we were kind of making estimations as to how things would go.
I think we were cracking like Trump jokes.
Yeah,
because I think he had just thrown his hat in the ring around that time. I don't recall much of that conversation. I think it was actually Clint instead of Henno that was the fourth on that episode. I could be wrong.
Well, I know you were on another subsequent one.
Sure.
Where it was a very similar lineup. I don't remember. So I do remember that was the first time we ever spoke. And I'm sure there were some Twitter things because that's at the time, like I was a huge, like listen and tweet guy. So I would have done that when you were on Diamond Mines.
Right.
And then at a certain point, I think you were on the Diamond Dave show. But it's not until after you start our liner notes that we really start talking. Was there anything in between there that you remember between like those first few episodes and like of like other people's shows and then starting your own and us kind of having a...
No, you've got it bang on. It was not Diamond Mine. Sorry. It was Glorious Gentleman. And then you were the third or fourth. I actually went to visit Dave in Calgary, and I was to get this very mixer I'm using tonight. My wife and kids and I went to visit her sister and Dave, and I was spending the afternoon with him at his apartment. And he's like, "Hey, want to record an episode? Let's do it." And I believe that was the discussion of whether or not Dave should go back to school.
Yes. Oh,
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, but exactly that. Once I had decided to start our liner notes, I believe you were like our second guest ever.
Yeah, and I remember getting, I think Paul had sent me one of the early, if I didn't hear episode 1 as episode 0, then I heard episode 1 the moment it dropped. because Paul was like, how do we do?
Right. And then from there, I think it was all Twitter communications. We discovered on that show that we had some musical common ground. And so I think that became a point of conversation on top of now sort of becoming the part of the same podcast circle. So I think we were commenting on each other's tweets here and there. And then we just built a relationship. But where I think we really hit our stride and started, extracurricular communication, if you want to call it that, was when we did the first concert episode of Our Liner Notes, which was several months later, in which Paul was essentially the third wheel, while you and I just told Aerosmith stories. And then then you got my number, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's funny because at that point I still don't have international calling. So like I know there were a couple times at one of my previous jobs where I would try and hit you up around lunchtime because I did have international calling at the office.
Right.
And we talked a few
times.
So
should we? I guess we should tell people I live in Canada.
Yes.
Not only is this a long distance relationship, this is an international relationship that we have. I mean, now that Dave is down there, I think I'm one of your only international friends aside from Paula, maybe. But of this group of four, we don't live in the same country.
Yeah, you're the only international. I mean, not only are we, we're on opposite coasts. You're not on the coast, but you might as well be. Like it's a 3-hour time difference. So you are at least in the Pacific time zone, which that's the West Coast. I know you're not there, but that's what.
Well, I think the Atlantic is as close to you as the Pacific is to me. So it's pretty darn close.
There's that, and then when you and Dave and Paula were the three reasons I was like, I have to get international calling. Now, at a certain point, I realized that I could text internationally, and that kind of upped the ante because now it was a little more instant than being on Twitter. Like, I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm not on Twitter like all the time. And when we started texting, is kind of where it went to that like next level. So. And then, at a certain point, I do get international calling and we're talking, but I guess it leads straight into like, how did we become friends? Because it's not like, we ramped up the talking, but you talk to acquaintances too. Like there's no guarantee that we became friends. Or there's no guarantee at that point, right? Like everything we've said is accurate to the history, but like, that can happen in that way with anyone.
Well, I think where it really took off was, so I remember the international calling phone, but there was a period there where you had two numbers, and you're like, if it's at this time, you have to call this number, and if it's this time, you have to call that. And I remember getting confused which number, and I'd call the wrong one sometimes. But nonetheless, when we did talk, there was a point there. I want to say it's around, I know I'm relating everything back to the Our Liner Notes podcast, but it's really my best time marker for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's somewhere around episode 50 where Paul and I are having trouble connecting because he had to start traveling for work a whole lot more. And then you add in the times difference and that. And I was starting to struggle with what to do with the show. At that point, I was pretty much, I think we should wrap it up because I don't see it moving forward. And I wasn't looking for a new host or anything like that. But as I was starting to contemplate maybe doing solo episodes or reworking formats, you became my sounding board. So while we would chat about podcasting, and then, I'd say, I'm thinking about this idea. And you'd be like, oh, that's great. Why don't you try this? And so it was this great back and forth about the show. But at some point, that conversation would end.
Yes.
And then it would be like, so how's your mom doing? Oh, this shitty thing happened to me at work. And all of a sudden, the conversation just shifted to how any two guys who were friends would chat to one another.
Yeah, it was, it's one of those things where you can't put your finger on it like it was this date on this call. It just kind of like happened, right? And for and there's that point, and you know, I mean, it's not like we can check the tape, but like there's that point where we go from, I have this idea for our liner notes discussion, hey, what about the Jays game, to
Yes.
what about the to like the sports, the, you know, how's Kristin, how are the kids, like that stuff went from being the, okay, we're done with the podcast conversation, let's move on to other things, and all of a sudden it became, well, how are the kids first, or hey,
That's
did you
right.
see that game last night? Like that stuff becomes paramount in the conversations we're having, and then we get to the podcast stuff.
That's right.
And I think that's when you notice, like in hindsight, that's when you go like, all right, well, that was clearly when the relationship shifted from just like, oh, we're podcasters together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, and some of the things we did end up talking about pretty personal stuff. I mean, you had a wonderful show where you had Neil on a while back, and you guys got into, you know, the
Our anxieties.
mental health,
Yeah.
anxieties and mental health and all the rest. And I clearly remember sitting in the garage for like 2 hours, you know, years ago, having that same discussion with you. You're just saying, by the way, here's a side of me I not like I think you should know, but you just, well, I'm letting you in a little bit, and here's something I'm dealing with. And I you know, and from that point on, I remember talking about that a lot, and just listening to you basically working through it yourself.
Well, it was also a point of, you know, we had talked about getting together at some point, and I was like, I won't be getting on a plane. Now, if we hadn't become as close as we had, I think that's where that conversation ends. Well, I don't get on a plane, or I'm not comfortable getting on a plane. I don't have to give you the backstory, but yeah, we went through that at a certain point. And then, you know, you talk about like the other stuff, like before you had a show with your wife, like, and I don't know how this happens, because it's not just Twitter. Like at a certain point, I'm texting with Kristin, like, and I'm, you know, before how was your week, and like having conversations. And I mean, more recently, and it's 50-50. Half of it's on me, half of it's on one of your daughters, and I'm not going to name who, but like we were pen paling. I was pen paling with your daughters, and now I have to write one of them, and one of them has to write me, is where we're at. But like, it's like at a certain point, I feel like I became part of the family, like without actually, you know, doing much, just kind of being me.
Well, I think like if you were my next door neighbor, or you lived on the street, or I mean, even hell, if you were my golfing buddy, if that person is a big enough part of one person's life, then, you know, when you get home or you're talking to your partner, and in this case, Kristin, you know, oh, I was talking to Jason today. Da 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 da. I mean, it's just natural that if you are a part of my daily conversation, then it seeps into my conversations with my wife, and then she gets to know you, you know, first through me, and then personally herself, and then, I mean, our biggest focus is our children. So again, if you're becoming a part of our lives, that's just sort of a natural progression of how it goes. The only thing that makes it strange is that we've never physically seen you.
Yes,
in the flesh.
In the flesh. Now, I want to go back to something, because I wasn't Jason. Like, I mean, and I talked to Bill about this, because Bill was, and you were both kind of around when I changed the Twitter name, not the handle, but the name to be me, which was, you were one of the people I talked to about that. And it was also like, all right, well, I mean, you kind of knew about this podcast ahead of time. You were on the inner circle for that too. But it was also like, I'm not Jason, for like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's odd. And at the same time, it just kind of fits the narrative of everything I've been through. Is that people don't know me. I mean, they know me genuinely because I'm never like, I'm not creative enough to be two different people. I could go by a different name, but I'm still me. But like, that's gotta be, Paul had the hardest time with it. As an example, right? Like, go back and listen to some of those Our Liner notes. When I send in an email, even if I sign it off as Palmer, he's like, we got an email from Jason. Like, there were times even listening, I'm like, who's he? He's still talking about me, right?
Right. Well, I wonder if that's an age thing, though. You know, for someone like Paul, the way that I know him, you use someone's proper name. You wouldn't use a nickname. So I think Paul would have I shouldn't say an issue, but it would be difficult for someone like him or my father to call you by not your given name.
Yes.
Palmer is your nickname. Now, for the rest of us, I mean, Palmer is a term of endearment at this point. Like, to and there's a difference, because I think someone that wouldn't know you would refer to you as Agent Palmer.
Sure.
But for the rest of us, Palmer is just your friendly old nickname.
Yeah. Is there... So my partner Steph still, I'm not called the same thing by her twice in a row.
No, and probably a lot of those words you can't use on this program.
No. I mean, it's but sometimes it's Jason and sometimes it's Palmer, and this isn't just based around company we're with. It's like, when it's just the two of us,
she slides back and forth.
Well, and because
so do I.
But she knew again. She first knew me as Palmer. It's very odd, but I guess it's a testament to my actual personality that, like, it doesn't matter what the label is.
That's right. You
Jason
yourself,
or Palmer,
they're the same person. So yeah.
So we, Paul, around that 50 episode, Paul kind of starts to fade away a little bit, and I volunteered to do like an episode with you.
Mm-hmm.
Not step in and be a co-host necessarily.
No, but you didn't shy away from it either.
No, well, we were having fun. I mean, because that's the other thing. Our relationship on mic for that show is very much just a focused version of our relationship off mic, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree. If you were to listen in on one of our conversations, it might not be as up as it is on mic. But,
yeah, that's true.
But the same ribbing and the same back and forth and the same subject matter certainly happens.
Now, you are older than me, but like, I find it where it's like, I met Zapata in high school. You meet people in high school. I met Chris in college. You meet people in college, right? Yeah. Bill was one of those guys that, like, from the internet, same as you. Like, I kind of hold, Chris Hughes and Jason Zapata are in a league of their own. Like, it's decades now that I've known them. But you and Bill are equal because, like, I chose you. Do you know, like there's a different level. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a different level because it's like, I'm the guy who, after college, thought I knew I had all the close friends I was ever going to need. I didn't think I was going to need anymore. When you talk to not Kristin, or even the first time to Kristin, you're like, I'm talking to this guy. Like, I'm making a new friend at, and I mean, not even giving away ages, but like at over 30, because I was past 30 at that point. And it's just like, I'm making a new friend post 30. Like, that's, I just couldn't comprehend, like, that part of it looking back now is like the incomprehensible part. Like, not that we met on the internet, just like, I made a friend after 30. Like, no, like, people don't do that.
Well, I think, so you're talking about your other friends, Chris and Zapata, who, what I'll call proximity friends, as in you were in high school and you made a friend because that's what you do. There is a group of people, you are surrounded by a group of people, and whether you befriend many of them or just one of them, you will, because they are in your orbit, become friends. However it is you line up. And same with Zapata being a college friend. He was in your college orbit, and you met, and so be it.
Reverse it, but yeah. I
okay,
get you.
sorry.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, this is not that much different. And I think the age difference is a testament to that. We're friends by proximity in that we were traveling in the same circle. Digitally.
Yep.
At the same time with, a conflation of different interests that met up. And so we began, I would almost say that those relationships are more natural because they're purely predicated on common interest and conversation. It's not just, hey, you seem okay and I need a friend while I'm in this strange place and I'm alone. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's human nature to need a friend, to have a companion, somebody to share the experience with, to help you through the experience. Where this is a relationship built purely on just a natural back and forth that grows over time.
I have stated I was comfortable with the friends I had before, right?
Yeah.
Like, were you? Like, I mean, you talk about leaving where you were and, you're going to a new place and, I'm, discounting, meeting me and the whole internet bubble that you have now.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, obviously family first and you've got 2 daughters and you've got a wife, but like, were you was there ever a part of you where you were like, I'm looking for a friend? Or was it like, no, I have enough?
I don't think I ever said I had enough because I didn't have any here. I have my wife, who's my best friend. But as far as casual friends to do things with, I still don't really have them here. I've met a few people here and there, but the interests just don't line up. And for whatever reason, I haven't made those connections. So at no point was I ever saying I don't need a friend. But at the same time, I wasn't sitting around going, man, I wish I had a friend. But I think because I didn't have that kind of, outside my family circle connection with somebody, it made me very open to these kind of relationships. And sure, when I first started podcasting and, tweeting back and forth with some people, I probably trivialized it to some degree. Oh, this is neat. This person seems nice. You know what I mean? And, even talking with my wife, I can think a few times with Kristin going, is this weird? Like, is it strange that, I'm not just talking, like commenting on someone's post. I'm private messaging someone and I've been holding a conversation with them for the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
But once I got over that, I mean, now here we are 5-6 years later, whatever it is, and it's quite normal. And I enjoy, it's actually the perfect kind of relationship for me just because of the family situation and everything that we talked about earlier. So my long-winded way of answering your question, no, I wasn't done with friends. No, I wasn't particularly looking, but I think now that I look back, I probably was, wanting those connections, and I will still continue to make them. I'm happy to have more friends now at this point.
All right, I mean that's fair. I mean, because I'm not your only close friend from the internet either by any stretch. And I'm not, I think it's one of those things like looking back, like when you look at friendship as, I don't even want to say an older person, but just like with more experience, like any kid's movie, right? Like you can't have 2 best friends. That's, you know what I mean? Like you can't. And like I'm, you're the 4th only by measure of like, you're the person I've met most recently. You're the 4th of 4 best friends I have. Like of different varying degrees, but like you're all equal. Like if circumstance, obviously, location and time zone, but if you were all my neighbors, like it's flip a coin who I'm calling, except like I'll probably, depending on which band I want to talk about is which person I go to, right? Or like, oh, I have a technical question, so I'll go to whatever. Like, but it's just, that's the fascinating thing to me because nobody talks about friendship anymore.
Maybe. I also think that you lose the idea of best friend post your school years. because your best friend in a lot of ways is the person who knows you best, the person you can depend on, and the one that helps you and sees you through things, and vice versa. And like for me, once I got married, and it wasn't just because I got married, but I found my best friend. And so because I have that, that soul person, I got that covered, right?
Okay.
So I'm good.
Yeah.
So now everyone else is just my friends. And I don't mean to say just.
No,
but like you were saying, I have a lot of people that are now outside the immediate family that are all equal, as you said, that I enjoy for different reasons and different things, and they facilitate different kinds of conversations, and they spark different parts of my brain and my imagination, and I like it all.
You get the benefit of being last as well, because like I get to start putting things together, right? Like there's commonality of like, Zapata and I worked on a book together. At minimum, we did that. We've also worked on a novel, and there's other things in the works, right? Chris and I founded companies. Bill and I worked on events and podcasts together, and you and I have worked on podcasts together.
So maybe that's the other great thing is that, your connection is with creative types, right? And the internet's been great for you to find other people like you in that way.
Yes and no. Like I've found creative types I can't work with as well. So and it's not, it's not always just personality. I mean, it is, but it's not. Like there are intangibles that are just like it's just not working. So that's kind of what makes you and I like. It makes it, I don't know. Like I've worked on shows before where I've bowed out after a certain period of time because I just couldn't do it anymore. And with you and I, it's more circumstance, right? It's the time zone. It's, I lament this all the time, but it's not like it got any better or worse. Like we always recorded at night. Like we like I was always staying up late to do this. And I enjoy doing it. That's why I like, there are things, like what else would I be doing? Like what could be better than this right now? Like, I mean, I get to hang out with you and have a conversation. And if it's not this show, then we're talking music on any other given night. Right. So it's enjoyable. And, for a while we had a regular schedule, but even when we're not regularly recording, we are still regularly talking. And one of these unique things for our relationship, because of the distance, is there are times when I will wake up to a text from you that you sent before you went to bed that I'm like groggy looking at my phone going, what is he even talking about?
That's okay. I get the same thing because when you text at your 7 a.m., which is 4 in the morning for me, and I'm getting up for work at 6 or whatever it is, and I'm thinking, he sent this 2 hours ago. What the fuck? So I know what you mean.
Yeah, but I enjoy it. It's been one of those, Twitter's been good to me. Like,
sure.
I know.
Yeah, we call it a Twitter happy accident.
I mean, you can call it a lot of things because coincidence works too. Because if Dave, like, if all things are equal and Dave's not in that circle, you and I miss out. Like we're not connected. It's Dave, and then from Dave to Paul, and from Dave and Paul to you and me.
Yeah.
Like there are lines. We talk about proximity. It's not that different. Like the proximity of people who follow a show is not that dissimilar to like being in high school, right? Like, I mean, aside from the mandatory elements, but like, you're there in this crew and it's not full of like all completely like-minded individuals. Like they are individuals. It's not like there's 100 people listening to a podcast and they're all the same person. Like that doesn't happen. And then there's these side things that kind of happen, it's not always just, hey, we're spinning off another podcast. Sometimes people just talk.
Sure. Well, but you got to give yourself some credit in all of this because, again, like you mentioned earlier, you were someone who loved to tweet and listen. So you engaged, right? So right there, that first step put you out there for people to even know who you were because you were not a podcaster. You were a podcast listener. That is how I knew you, who happened to, we're not going to get into the proxy caster thing that is dead. But you were, when I knew of you, a listener.
Yeah.
And then you became a collaborator and then a frequent guester, etc. And it's that, I don't know, willingness to put yourself out there, willingness to engage. How you did make some of this happen just by your own actions. So there's some credit there to be had on your part. It's not like, while a lot of it happened organically once the conversation started, you did initiate a lot of these friendships. I would say without you, I mean, it sounds silly to say without you, the friendships don't exist, but I mean, you could exist, but if you weren't you wouldn't have the newer friendships that you have now. I mean, we've barely talked about it. You're having all your friends on, this 4 episodes, but your best friend that lives with you, if you want to go best friend, Steph, she is also a result of this online friendship engagement that we're talking about.
Yeah, yes. I'm not discounting that. Suffice to say that, I'm trying to put the spotlight on these 4 relationships, but I've actually written about this on my blog a few times, in that, blogging for me has been an exercise in writing, and also a yelling, like a screaming into the void mentality. And I see Twitter as very much the same thing. And I got comfortable. Like, I think I take it for granted that people were starting to yell back, right? Like, I was doing all this live tweeting, but at the very beginning, I'm not just live tweeting independent shows. I'm live tweeting big shows too. I don't live tweet Marin anymore. I don't live tweet what was Nerdist, is now ID10T. I don't live tweet those big shows anymore because I got tired of yelling into the void, and because on an independent level, people like Grant and Jay and Bill and you and Dave started tweeting back, right? Hey, I really whatever. And so I was comfortable with the silence, right? I was putting something out there, but I was comfortable with, all right, that's done. Nobody, it's out there, but nobody's gonna, so I don't know how much credit I should get for that, because I was doing it, but I wasn't, at a certain point, you just go, all right, well, I'm getting one response for every 1,000 tweets or whatever it is. It's not like, ooh, I'm a celebrity. And even if you look at their engagement, right? How many people are following them versus how many people actually respond. It's all right, well, I guess I'm doing this for me. What? No, I there's no expectation. So, I also can't go back and be like, well, why was I doing it then? I don't know. It's one of the great mysteries. I have a wonderful partner and I have all these wonderful friends, and it's because I did this, but I don't know why I started it. One day I just decided that was what I was going to do.
Right. And who knows, but one could maybe surmise that you were looking for that connection where you say, I'm good with the number of friends you had. Maybe you weren't. You didn't know. I mean, you were clearly looking for some kind of engagement. I mean, you're listening to Marin as an example, who's a thought-provoking guy. and he said something and you're like, I think this. Now, and let me put it to you this way. I'm someone that was new to Twitter. Like, getting into podcasting got me on Twitter.
Okay.
Otherwise, Twitter was just, I didn't even like Facebook at the time. I didn't need any of it, right? I didn't even understand Twitter. But I can think of some of the early podcast shows, that got me aware of what that even meant. And the number of thoughts and reasons why I listened to that show is they would say something that would spark a memory like, oh, it reminds me of this thing. And you almost get excited while you're listening because listening to the conversation of two strangers, it sparks thoughts and memories and you want to get that out there. So you're really looking for someone to share that with. You can't share it with the hosts, even though you being on Twitter, you're like, well, I'm going to throw this at you because you made me think of X. And of course, shows of that size, they're not going to engage with everybody that's, throwing out every random thought at them. So then you come along to your independent podcast and you're having the same kinds of thoughts. And all of a sudden the host or the producer or a fan says, yeah, or no, you're full of shit. I think this. And, and all of a sudden it starts. You've stoked the fire, right? The embers are going, and the next thing you know, maybe a third jumps in, and then you're talking to the host, and now you and the host are back, and that's what you did. So maybe you found friends that you didn't know you were looking for, but maybe you were.
All right, I'll take it under advisement. I'm not going to buy it whole hog, but I will take it under advisement. So you were within an hour and a half of me.
Okay, we're talking about this.
We'll talk about the missed connection, right? Like I had a job that I knew I wasn't going to have for very long, but I was hopeful, and in hindsight, I can say I misread it. There was never a reason to stay and not go. But I didn't. And I know that, similar to, say, missing out on, the Portland meetup, or say the first Podtoberfest where I was a remote help, and the flack I took before I agreed to go to the second Podtoberfest, like, there are some things that I have just not done. And look, in all honesty, there was definitely a lot of anxiety around that, and it wasn't you. Like, and it's, I mean, for the listening audience, the anxiety was travel. It was definitely not meeting you. I mean, if anything, the experiences I had prior where I'm meeting these people that I just talked to on Twitter and I get into a room with them and it's just like, I've always known you and it's not awkward. Like, that's not the reason. For me, it's always been travel or being in a new place or whatever. So I didn't. I know it was a disappointment.
Okay, now my turn.
Okay.
Because you're right. Kristin and I took Kristin to Manhattan for her 40th birthday. Now, this isn't something, well, to her, it was a surprise. I sprung it on her.
Yes.
But you knew that I had been planning this trip. I think I told you a good 8 to 9 months in advance. I'd been planning it over a year in advance.
Yep.
And we had even had conversations that far back of like, if I was ever to go to New York, and we talked about me flying into Scranton and you picking us up, spending the night at your place, then we could travel in. Now, we had a shortened amount of time and the flight costs, because Canada flights they're outrageous. And we just honestly couldn't afford to fly into where you are and then travel into this. It wasn't going to work. But you knew well in advance I was going to be there. Now, I was aware of your anxiety issues at that time.
Yes.
However, the Neil episode shed a little more light on just sort of the depths of it. But I knew the stories, and I know that travel is the source of a lot of your anxiety. My issue, where I got upset, was not that you didn't go, but that I don't feel that you were honest about why you didn't go. Even just now, I know you kept saying, well, there's this work thing.
No,
you knew
fair.
knew dates
That's fair.
months ahead of time.
That's fair.
You could have blocked off that day. It would not have been that big an issue because you had so much time, and that you just couldn't face me and say,
well,
I'm not comfortable traveling into the city and I don't know if I can make it. I would have accepted that.
Except the one piece of information you're forgetting is that when you were planning all of that, you planned that before I lost my one job and then before I got the next one, right? So there.
But it was still weeks for you to say, "Hey, I can't make it on Friday because I have a meeting," or you could have come up with 1,000 excuses. You still had weeks.
Nope, that's fair. That's
like
you're
if
right.
the Baltimore Orioles were playing in the park next door, you would have found a way to have gone to that game. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, no, I wouldn't have, because I haven't been there since any of this either. But I have made it a habit, and you're the first person to but to be fair, you're the only person with a major gripe, right? Like, I may have done this to Bill or the other Chris or Zapata, but it's on such a small level because we're so much more localized that it's not the one time, right? But even with them, and Neil and I didn't get into this too much, but like, I don't know why I still am slightly not comfortable with that being the reason. Like, I will always find some other reason for it to not be anxiety as the reason I didn't. It was definitely the reason I didn't, but I will always find a reason. Not even with you. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, if I'm going to be completely honest, I think I've done it to my parents too.
Oh,
where
sure.
Where it is anxiety. That's the reason I don't want to do a thing, but that's not the reason I'm giving.
No, because it makes it less personal that way. It allows you to confront the anxiety. And again, I'm not saying it's as simple as get over it. That's not the statement I'm making.
Yeah.
But anxiety is a personal issue that you are dealing with. That is your issue.
Yeah.
And so if you were to say to someone, my issue is preventing me from X, now you kind of feel like it's on you, where if you kind of just push it off to the side, well, this outside thing over here, that's fault. And now we don't have to talk about the elephant in the room addressing my anxiety issues. Because while, anxiety is not one of those things, as you said with Neil, quite brilliantly, you don't just get through it. You don't just get over it. It's not a button that you push. It's,
yeah. I mean, Neil has the description down pat. It's like, if you told me I only had to deal with this 100 times, but on the 101st one it would be over, that would be perfect. But that's not how this works. Like, and it's also not like, well, if you're good on the 101st, it might come back on the 102nd, and you don't know what it's going to be like that time. Then it's going to be different. And now we're in a battle of the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And it's like, all right. So I tend to keep like a closer grasp on it, but it didn't feel like, but again, I mean, as we're talking about it in hindsight, like, it just puts you in with not everybody else. 'Cause like, if you're not a friend, I don't even try. Like, I just don't.
Just nope.
I just don't even play, right? Like, it's like, nope, that's just not happening. So like, but I mean, and this is going to be news to my partner, Steph, who did go to see you.
And she was lovely. We had a great time.
there were definitely some sleepless nights like in those 2 weeks prior where I was just like, can I make this happen? Like, and it's not, that's my personal battle, right? Like while people out there are like, well, why didn't you share that with, say, Steph or even you? And it's like, well, because that's not like there's, if there was something you could do to help, I would. But this is a personal battle, so to speak. And even vocalizing it's not a
way of working through it.
Yeah, not so much. At least in like I have told you, right? Like I didn't have to, right? There was never a point in, even after we became friends, like with the exception of New York, there was never going to be a reason for me to have to bring it up. And I brought it up well before that was even a possibility. So I'm not afraid to vocalize it with people, but it doesn't share the load, I guess.
Which is fair, but this was the point that I was getting at with this as to why the bigger reason why you try to divert attention from it. It's the people that are closest with you, your friends, your partner, your parents. You say that, yes, I'm going to make the effort to come up with the excuse, so that I won't do with other people. But I think that's also part of a little bit of a defense mechanism that also allows you to not have to deal with the anxiety. Anxiety is something you cannot control, but it is something you can work on.
Yes.
And it is something again, I'm generalizing a lot, but there's different avenues, there's different techniques, there's different psychologies to the whole thing that it's easy to just say, well, I can't because of anxiety. But what are you doing about it? And people who don't know you, they're not going to push you. They don't care. They might make some offhanded joke like he never leaves the Shire or et cetera, et cetera. But your real friends, the people that care about you and the people that know you, are going to try and push you out of your comfort zone because they care for you and want you to do more, and they don't want you to miss out on these experiences. And they will make you face it more than you might have to.
And that's fair. And that's, now's the time, right? So I guess, Chris, why are we still friends? Like
because are you not having fun? Are you not entertained?
Of course I'm having fun, but this is
because I feel, okay, so let's rewind to like the 30-minute mark where are you looking for friends or are you satisfied with your friends? This conversation satisfies me. It scratches an itch. I feel like, Chris and I have talked about this all the time. I went to school. For a long time. There was a period in my life where I was toying with the idea of going to medical school. I have all the prerequisite classes for it. I went to air traffic control school. In a lot of ways, my mind is geared like an academic. However, my current career is blue collar.
Yeah.
I go to work every day. And, there's things I love about it, and I love being a business owner, but there are certain parts of my noggin that just do not get engaged. And you facilitate that for me. There are conversations that I have with you. There are moments that we have together where you scratch that itch and I can say those things, but you say things in return that make me think of the next thing. And, you're highlighting parts in my brain, the synapses are firing and stuff that I don't get on a daily basis in a lot of other aspects. And so that's why.
It's funny because academics probably the nicest thing people say about me sometimes. But that is a thing where, it doesn't come up necessarily, but I do look for people that will challenge me mentally, right? Like you want people that are like, I like to think, and, of course this is happening now. Like I didn't get a chance to ask the other three, but I'd like to think that the other three are in some ways smarter than me. And
Sure.
so were you, right? Like, I mean, we just did a CanCon series, and that was not, I won't call that necessarily smarter than me, because it's just different information. It's not like, you know algebra, right? Like but you are still teaching me something, and you are still enlightening me and broadening my horizons, right? It's all of us who ended up, you know, you went to school for different things. I went to school not for different things, but I was a liberal arts communication major. I couldn't make up my mind. You end up in no one gets like as a freshman in high school. What do you want to be when you go to like higher education? Liberal arts. No, everybody's like, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. And then there's those of us that go, I don't know, that end up in like liberal arts. Like that's where you end up, right? Because like,
I just know I needed to go to school, so I'm here. Or what happens next?
Or just like I'm interested in all of it. Like so and it's,
but that's perfect. I'm interested in all of it, and I think all these people that we're talking about that we're engaging online and through these friendships, they're interested in all of it, or at least there's a large chunk. And podcasting's, I feel like I've used the word facilitate 1,000 times tonight, but it does it.
I'll edit this down and make this your 15-minute TED Talk. Don't worry.
Okay. But it does allow that engagement of all these different topics, and us to have even though you're just a little square on my Skype screen, we are still having a face-to-face conversation. I mean, we just worked out a few things tonight in the last 15 minutes that we hadn't really talked about. And to add to it, the thing that it does that also allows us to stay friends, we challenge one another. I challenge what you think, and you challenge what I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to challenge you, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's also, I think, a testament to the fact that, like, there is a lot in dialogue. Like, I think a lot of things, and, you know, a lot of things get lost in, he's my golf buddy, he's my bowling buddy. Like, that's fine. Like, it's great that you get together and do those things with those people, or I play games with that guy. That's fine. But, like, can you talk to that person? Like, you know, because that's the real, I think that's, you know, the real, like, maybe crux of of any friendship, right? It's like when there's nothing to do. When you're
because that's all this is.
Yeah.
That is all our relationship has ever done, is talk to one another.
Yeah. I mean, that's I don't think proximity would change it. At least not now. Maybe in the very beginning it would have. But I think we would always have ended up being you know, hell, like we've done it digitally, right? Like we watched a baseball game together. And we did what you would normally do when you're watching a game with a friend. Like we told stories, we talked. Like it was just, you know, all these things that you would do. The only difference
Did you see that? That was stupid.
Well, that's the thing. The only difference was that one of us, and I don't remember because it was a while ago, one of us was a bit ahead.
Yeah.
It was like, wait until you see that catch. Like, but we've done this, and we have these common interests, and I like the idea. You know, one of the more unique things is the international flavor, but that, like, even before I met you, had a small inkling into Canada. Not big, but like, of the two of us, who's the bigger CFL fan? And then,
yeah, right.
You know, like there are things that just kind of connect us in ways that just kinds of defies all logic from prior to, right? Like, you go back to that episode where we talked first concerts. Like, so we both went to Aerosmith first. Like, there are just... I'm not going to say it was written in the stars, because you can read these things in other things, and it's easier to read things in hindsight. And it's not destiny, right? Like, you could have not been on that podcast, right? Like we know all the alternates, but all of those things did happen, and we're here. One of my favorite stories, and I haven't told this to really anyone, so I get to tell it now, is that your wife wanted to send me a Canadian classic holiday DVD and sent me something else instead. What did she send me, Chris?
All right, the quick version of the story. The film you're talking about, and I can see it on my shelf right from here, and it's called Cooper's Camera, and it's a Canadian-made Christmas film by Samantha Bee and her husband Jason Jones. We bought 10 of them from Walmart for like $5 a piece, wrapped them and sent them as gifts, but all of them didn't go out, and we were trying to locate one to send to you. And we were digging through the closet, and we found this wrapped DVD. And I said, sweet, this must be one of them. Let's get it out to Jason. Not thinking to look what was wrapped, because what would be in there other than the pre-wrapped Christmas gifts that we gave to other people? Forgetting that 5 or 6 years prior to that, to family members who attended, who had gone home before the DVD was made, we actually sent them wedding videos wrapped, and that's what you received. The funniest part of the story was you thought that was totally normal. Hey, thanks for the gift.
I didn't.
And we thought, great.
Well, because
then you made some comment that you messaged me. You're like, I can't believe how little Rowan is. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, no. So I didn't. Well, first of all, I didn't ask for the movie you were going to send. Like, this was unprompted. No, so, like, I just got a thing in the mail and was like, oh, okay, all right. And then I popped it in. And I was like, whoa, holy, like, wow. They're like, it's just. I was just like, all right. Well, I guess now I get to see it. What I do remember is How Was Your Week, Honey had kind of just started around there, but you guys hadn't told your full you hadn't gotten to do your full origin story yet. So while I knew bits and pieces, and you kind of touched on, like, I finally got to see the wedding and I was like, all right, well, because no, it's not the most normal, but like we had talked about things like that. So for me, it wasn't it wasn't like it was out of the blue to receive anything, but like it wasn't like, oh, like this, like, no, it was like, okay, well, now I get to, all right, I didn't even know them at this point. And I watched it, and I don't remember you're right, I don't remember what I texted you, but I texted you something, and you were like, what are you watching? And I just took a picture of my TV because it was the easiest way to do it. And I don't know, like, I don't know.
I think I messaged back, holy shit. I don't even watch that video.
Well, I mean, I haven't. It's not like a rewatch, but I did watch it the one time all the way through, and see what happens. I mean, I know how it ends.
Yeah. Wow.
Wikipedia defines friendship as a relationship of mutual affection between people. My trusty Funkin' Wagnalls defines it as a mutual regard cherished by kindred minds. Both are accurate, and while the second may be more to my liking, and not just because it is much more poetic, friendship, while it can be defined by definition, is mainly defined by experience. Whether you are still, as I am, friends with someone from high school or college, or someone from long ago or more recently, you don't need a definition to know who your friends are. You just know. But how do you know? That's the whole reason for this 4-episode series. Perhaps there will be some commonality between my 4 closest friends, but perhaps I'm the only common theme. No matter the theme, the consistencies, or the aberrations, one thing remains true. These are my friends by any definition. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 28. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, and my friend Chris at Chris Maier BC. You can hear more of him on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast, or with his lovely wife Kristin on their lifestyle podcast, How Was Your Week, Honey? You can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and all links will be available in the show notes. Email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if you have any feedback on this or any previous episode, if you've enjoyed this series, what you've taken away from the series, or if there's a topic or guest you'd like me to consider. Chris, do you have one final question for me?
I do. Is there a scenario or a way that you could possibly see yourself making your way up here to come visit us sometime? We came out there to I mean, we were doing other things, but we were in the area and wanted to meet up with you. It was important. Is there a scenario that you could see where you would be able to come up to the Great White North and spend some time with us?
So, I mean, this does nothing for the listening audience. As I'm looking through my desk drawer, but I did get a passport this year.
Oh,
because I do have family on the other side of Canada, closer to me. Now, what I will tell you is, despite my anxiety, I still have the dream of taking a road trip. Because while travel does make me anxious, at least if I'm driving, I have a little more control. Big cities still freak me the hell out, which is a whole thing I'm going to have to figure out along the way, unless I just stop in small towns from here to there. And luckily you don't live in a big town. So, I mean, it does work out. My biggest issue now is, finance and job, right? I mean, that's always the thing. And I don't know if I might have talked about it with Neil off mic, right? But it's one of those things where if I had 2 months, I would hope it wouldn't take me 2 months to get from here out west and back. But I would love to have 2 months in the event that I freak out in Des Moines and need to stay a couple days and collect myself. So that's the real issue, because I don't know if the anxiety of you have 2 weeks, you have 1 week to get there and 1 week to get, I don't know if that, but I'm not writing it out completely. I got the passport to at least get a little travel. And I know that, despite the fact that it would be ironic to the nth degree that we would meet up in Toronto and not New York. We have talked about the fact that, you haven't been back east for a while in your own country. And I'm trying, because last year I picked a CFL team. I didn't pick a good... I just picked a CFL team, man. I couldn't have picked worse if I had tried, right? But my name's Jason, and my aunt and uncle already have season tickets to the Argonauts. And it was a way for me to bond with my aunt and uncle, just to be because they go, so I could be like, hey, I was watching the game digitally, whatever. So it just happenstance, it became my favorite. I that was the team I chose, right? So they want me to come up and go to a game with them. If everything could work out, at minimum, that would be. But I do want to see, like, I live in a small wine area. You live in a wine area. Like, I know it's beautiful country. Like, I've seen the pictures. I do want to get there. It's circumstance has to be right, I think. Because it's, and Neil and I touched on it a little bit. Like, if I came out and you freaked out and it's just like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. And then I'll go, like, that's fine. Maybe, but I don't think that would settle well. It would need to be substantial, or at least a few days. And, it would kill your wife, the planner, because just getting there would be enough for me. I don't need to see anything. Like, let me just get here first, right? But it is a thing where I'm not completely erasing it from the cards. But I mean, honestly, the passport was the first big step in all of that. The rest is now timing and circumstance. So we will see. But I'm not writing it out.
We'll see you when the borders open up.
When's that going to be?